We have an expert here on swimming. We're here to talk about one of my all-time favorite films, Thunderball, and the fact that this man played a major portion in the film's success. And this is Ricou Browning. Introduce yourself. And
hi.
My name is Mark Maddox. I'm a magazine illustrator and a bit of a film historian, but I work for several magazines doing covers and things like that, and I am a massive Thunderball fan. So we will begin. The movie was a 1965 film. It was directed, at least on the land, by Terrence Young.
Right. And
with underwater sequences directed by Ricou. And the film had a pretty big budget for that time period of $9 million. Now, $9 million doesn't sound like much now, but back then that was a huge amount. James Bond was in its, Goldfinger had definitely cemented that there was something there that the audiences wanted to see. Goldfinger was almost like a Star Wars of its day, and they wanted to top it, and they went with a Todd AO CinemaScope-like look, and they increased the budget, and they were going to make sure that their stuff did not look like other things that you could see, spy shows and spy movies, spy stuff on television stuff, so they really, cranked up the production on this one. So anyway, you were, at the time, were you working on Flipper when they contacted you about Thunderball?
No, we had already done Flipper in a show called Sea Hunt with Ivan Tors.
Right.
And I was at Ivan Tors Studios in Miami. And Kevin McClory called us and said they're shooting a movie with Bond underwater, and would we be interested in seeing about doing the underwater work? And Ivan told him yes, and I went to London to talk to Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman about shooting the underwater sequences. I was surprised because Cubby Broccoli was from Chicago, not from England. And anyway, during the meeting, they were considering Jacques Cousteau to shoot the underwater. And they said, why should I do it rather than him? And I said, well, when we shoot our shows, we're phonies. Everything we shoot is phony. And everything you're doing is phony. Cousteau shoots real stuff. So that's why you should hire us. And anyway, we got hired. And that's
you were
how
aware
it
of the
started.
Bond phenomenon at that point? I mean, when they first said, working on a James Bond movie, did you go yippee-ki-yay, or were you just like, yeah, get another job?
Another job.
So Neil Armstrong was the same way, so I guess, there you go. Let's talk about everybody here pretty much seen the film. Is there anybody who hasn't seen the film? Okay. We know that there's a scene with nuclear warheads being stolen from an airplane, where they kill the whole crew except for one rotten guy who's with them, and they bring the plane in, crash it on the water, land it on the water, and then it sinks down. That, I was listening to a little bit of your commentary on the Blu-ray, and it stunned me to what lengths it seemed you guys went to achieve that. With you want to go on a little bit about the plane and being underwater, getting it down there, and then filming around it?
We were shooting off of Clifton Pier, and we had cables set up for the aircraft, and we used the cables to have it come in to land on the ocean. And the cables were a little thick, and when they saw the dailies, all you saw was an airplane with cables. Wow. So we had to redo it with much thinner cables, and we redid it, and it worked out fine. And we had underwater lights shining up, so that when we shot across the water, you could see them glowing as it was landing. Once it landed, we cut to the real size aircraft, which we got a portion of it, all except for the tail section, that we sank at Clifton Pier in about 50 feet of water. And when we sank it, we had one of our stuntmen, Courtney Brown, sitting in the cockpit, and as it was sinking, it was supposedly the pilot, as it was going down to the bottom. And Courtney had an air tank with him. It was under his seat, so that you could, when he needed air, he could grab it and breathe from it. But he couldn't find it, and so he got stuck in there. And when we hit the bottom, I went in, and there was Courtney looking for his air, so I gave him some of mine. And he came out, he was fine. But after the fact, he passed out, and we found out that his heart rhythm was stopped. And we took him to the hospital, and it took about 3-4 days before they could get his heart beating right again. But he was fine.
Wow. Wow.
And he was back to work in a couple of days.
Crazy.
Wow. I know that you had said that it's different filming in 50 feet of water as opposed to 30 feet. I know that there were some sequences where the water wasn't that deep and you didn't have to deal with certain problems. But when you're in 50 feet, what are the problems you have to
Well,
to
the
deal
only
with?
problem you have when you're working below 30 feet, you have to worry about getting the bends. So you can only dive a certain period of time at that depth. And we kept pretty close count of how long we dove and came up. And we tried to shoot everything at 50 feet first, and anything we had left to do that day, we'd go into 30 feet of water and finish the day off.
Now, a lot of the stuff when they show like close-ups of the actors, they're shot separately from what you guys are doing. The man who played Largo underwater and the killing of the pilot, I forget the character's name off the top of my head, but going down there, who were those guys?
Big John McLaughlin doubled Largo, and he did a very good job.
Right.
And all the way through the film.
I didn't know it wasn't him.
No, it wasn't.
Watched it plenty of times.
And then we do close-ups of the actors, just to cut with the doubles. James Bond was doubled by Frank Cousins, and Frank was an excellent swimmer, and he looked very much like Bond, and the doubling was done very well. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really notice it before. I thought that was Sean Connery in the majority, at least the majority of the scenes.
We did a lot of close-ups.
A lot of close-ups,
Yeah.
but I'm saying the physical, the guy that doubled him.
Yeah.
And the only way, I think there was one scene where he comes up out of the water, and when he gets up, it's Sean Connery, but his swimming trunks are dry. or close to it, and his hair's all combed, and I'm like, oh yeah, that would have been that would have been somebody else. Go ahead.
They goofed.
Yeah, it wasn't really that noticeable, but let's talk a bit about that super cool underwater equipment, the mini sleds, and then the single man propellers.
Well, a
devices.
guy from Florida, Jordan Klein, who lives in Ocala,
Mm-hmm.
he's an underwater cameraman, and we used him in Thunderball as a second camera. Lamar Boren shot the major role of underwater.
Mm-hmm.
But Jordan built all the apparatuses that was used in the film, and he worked with the English people to design them, and he built them in Ocala, and they all worked fine.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem we had was with the one that Bond wore on his back, the white one.
Mm-hmm.
It was a piece of junk, and the propeller would run, but it wouldn't push anything.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had him jump in the water out of the helicopter, we had to tow him on a wire, and we towed the double, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we used dye going through the propellers to make it look like a little jet going. And so we'd tow him through the water all the way up to the wreck where we did some of the fight scenes. And then he got off of it and he was on his own. And he used it to shoot shotgun shells out of the back of it. And then we worked out a way in a scene to get rid of it inside the wreck.
One thing that surprised me is that the spear guns on the devices were real on
Yes,
the
they
on
were
the,
real.
the sleds and everything.
Yeah.
Did I hear right? Did you have a mishap? Did you get stuck with a spear?
Yeah. No, well, I didn't get stuck with it. I mean, I fell into it.
Oh.
What happened is we did so many fights underwater and so many guys fighting each other. I just participated in some of the fights.
Mm-hmm.
And we were fighting on deck of the ship, up high, and we were rolling down the ship, and there was a spear gun that fell against the hull, and it was sticking straight up. And when we fell, my leg hit the spear, and it went into my leg. And the barb went in, so what they had to do was just unscrew the shaft, and the barb stayed there. And they took me into the hospital, and they cut it open and took it out and sewed it up, and I was fine. I was back to work in a couple of days.
Other things, they seem kind of hairy, working with sharks a bit.
Yeah, we had worked with some sharks before. About I'd say about 5 of the men that I used as divers were very good. And what we would do, we had a shark boat that had a well in the back of it, like a little swimming pool. And they would take the shark boat out and fish for sharks. And they'd catch a shark, they'd bring him into the ship, and they'd bring him into the little pool, close it, and then unhook him, and he's got a little swimming pool in there. Then we'd take him into a pen that we had built at Clifton Pier that's about the size of a football field, with wires, and it's in 30 feet of water. And we release the sharks in this pool, but we put a rope on his tail that trailed with another loop, and we just let him go. And we kept filling the pool with sharks because we knew we were going to use a lot of them. When we got ready to use a shark, we'd take a hook, like they use on a stage to pull somebody off, and we'd hook it through the loop that's trailing off the shark. He would swim as far as he could, but he couldn't go any further because you had him. He would go to the bottom, and while he was on the bottom, he couldn't breathe because they have to swim to force water through the gills, and that would slow him down. We'd send 2 divers into his forward fins and the pectoral fin, and 1 on the tail. And if he got too frisky, they'd just back off until they could come in and pick him up. Once they picked him up, we'd take the rope off his tail. Then we had gates to our pen. They'd take him outside of the gate, either tow the people with a rope towards the area we're going to shoot in, to the wreck or wherever. And once we get the shark there, we would release him and hope he swam in the right direction and go into the scene and do whatever we had to do. We found out that using a bull shark, a lemon shark, and sharks of that nature were tricky because they turned back on themselves real quick. We found out that a tiger shark more likely will swim in a straight line. So that's why we like to use tiger sharks. And they also had a bad reputation, so that helped. And they look good.
Yeah, beautiful.
That was it.
Now, we know you were out there in the ocean with your guys working and stuff too. There was a scene with an estate, Largo's estate, with a saltwater pool, a saline pool, swimming pool.
Yes.
Were you involved with that just as much as the other? I mean, did they go, hey, Ivan, here, we're putting sharks in
We
the pool?
had,
Or
they
not?
had a swimming pool where Largo lived.
Right.
And they had to have sharks in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we would bring the sharks in in a boat with a hammock to lift them up and bring them into the pool and put them down. You can't lift them up by their tail because they don't have bones. They have gristle as a spine, and you break their back and they couldn't swim very well.
Yeah.
So you had to be careful, lift them up with a hammock, put them into the pool and let them go. And we put 4 or 5 sharks in the pool that they used in the film.
And I heard something about Sean Connery almost walking on water when there was something with plexiglass that was used so that he could swim in between, swim and be right there with the shark, but there was that piece of plexiglass.
So we had, in the pool,
Uh-huh.
we had this plexiglass,
Right.
and then he was here, and they would shoot this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the shark couldn't get him because of the plexiglass.
Mm-hmm.
But he made the mistake by putting his hands on the plexiglass,
Yeah.
so you knew there's plexiglass there.
Right, right.
So that was all.
Well, I had also heard, I don't remember who was talking about it, whether it was Terrence Young, had said that they didn't have enough plexiglass, and the first time that Sean jumped in the pool to be with the sharks, that shark, when they let the shark out, the shark immediately, here's all this plexiglass, there's an open hole here, and the shark went, whoop, and came right back around, and Sean Connery, they said he never saw anybody get out of the pool so fast in his life.
I think he made that up.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember it actually in an interview with Sean Connery, so Sean Connery did say that, but I don't know.
I think they made that.
maybe spice up the film a little bit more.
Mark, could I ask a production question?
Sure,
while we're talking underwater?
absolutely, yes.
Mr. Browning, on Thunderball or in other underwater shoots that you did, you said you were 50 feet down. Throughout your career, did you always rely just on the scuba, or did you ever have helmet divers also for longer periods underwater?
No, in these particular shows, Thunderball and Never Say Never Again, it was all scuba.
Okay.
No hard hats.
Okay.
But some shows we worked on, we used hard hats.
Because I know as a creature you wrestled a hard hat diver in
Yeah.
Revenge. I was wondering, being down that deep and worrying about the bends, if you had to ever use the hard hats for practical production
No,
purposes.
we didn't use any hard hats.
There's a scene in the film where Sean Connery is trying to, or Bond is trying to, take a close look at Largo's boat at night. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well,
I mean, it does seem that it would be have its own set of difficulties filming at night.
we
underwater.
had to use lights.
Right.
And we'd have him swim into the boat
Mm-hmm.
and look up, and he sees the bottom of the boat.
Right.
And these were all done in shots, not just in one take.
Sure.
And we would light each shot for however it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd swim up, saw the bottom of the boat that would open, and took his camera out to shoot pictures.
Right.
The bad guy comes in and attacks him, and they fight, and the knife falls, and he takes off, and they throw hand grenades.
Right.
And each shot was done separately, and every time a hand grenade would go off, the cameraman would be on Bond, his double, and when the thing would go off, he would shake the camera,
Right.
and it would look like the grenade was getting Bond. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't difficult.
Right, right. There's a scene there where they hit his air tank as the
Yeah.
little boat, little speedboat drives over, and,
Right.
and he separates that out. You said something about at certain points using fiberglass tanks. Is that like just a prop tank, or is it?
He wore metal tanks,
Right, right.
but for those shots we had fiberglass tanks,
Mm-hmm.
and they floated. In those days, if you empty a tank completely, it will float.
Right.
But for those shots, we used fiberglass tanks,
Mhm.
so that it looks like the propeller of the boat hit them.
The cave where the villain stored the bombs. I was surprised to find that was an actual place. That wasn't just some kind of underwater
No,
set.
it
that
was an
built.
actual set.
It was beautiful.
It was shot in the Berry Islands,
Mhm.
and we found this beautiful cave, and we had to put doors into the cave,
Mhm.
and the currents were really rough, in and out,
Right.
and we had a hell of a time putting the doors in so that they would stay, because the water would keep washing them out.
Mhm.
And so we'd have to pick, and there was incoming tide and outgoing tide and ebb tide.
Mhm.
We had to put them in at ebb tide and shoot before we got tides going back and forth.
Right.
And we did it 3 or 4 different nights getting to ebb tide. And it was tough doing it. It was one of the hardest things to do with that sequence, was the doors.
Sure.
But it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Of course, it has one of the great. Well, you guys really seem to change underwater photography with this film and underwater scenes. I mean, the big fight at the end with all those guys, spear guns, rocket sleds, the jetpack under the water thing with Sean Connery being pulled on it, a wreck, everything. That just seems like, to me, the more I watch it now, it seems like it would have been a very, very tough thing to pull off with that many men. I got the impression that a lot of those guys were professional, or they were divers, but they weren't professional actors. They weren't Hollywood stuntmen, that you had to wrangle people.
Yeah, when we got ready to shoot the fight sequence,
Right.
we went to all the dive shops in Florida, and found out who all their dive people were. And they'd have maybe 15, one dive shop, another one had 15. And we hired about 40 over the state of Florida
Mhm.
and had them come to the Bahamas. And we had to tell them what we wanted them to do. And we were practicing with them, and we'd have to line them up, have them swim down. Well, they would each, some put on too much weight, some wouldn't have enough weight on, so they were all over the place. And then finally we got them pretty well adjusted, but they were coming down too fast, so they had too much weight on. And so they started taking the weight belts off and letting them go, and we were down underneath them. And we had weight belts all over the place. But finally we got them all weighted correctly and got them swimming in the correct formation, and they swam down, and we could do the scene. The bad guys, most of them were more experienced divers, and they were using the equipment, and we didn't have too much trouble with them at all. But the fight sequence took maybe, I'd say roughly a month to shoot.
Wow.
On and off. I mean, we didn't shoot, all the time. But I would say out of the month, we shot for 2 weeks and we got the fight sequence.
Right.
But we tried to think of every way in the world a man could kill another man in the water. So I finally asked the crew, I said, if you could think of a way you want to get killed, come up with it and we'll use it. And we did. And they used it. And it worked out very well.
I have this image of these guys all sitting around a board table going, okay, how do we kill people?
And we used animals. We had an octopus in this one scene, and a fish in another, and a lobster in another,
yeah.
and then a shark coming in.
That was something like the lobster, just a happy accident, you just came across
No,
it?
we got a lobster and we staged the shot.
Yeah. Well, I do know that there was once the scene with Domino and Bond where
The turtle?
she was with the turtle that you basically rescued. You saved its behind.
No, we couldn't get a turtle,
You couldn't get a turtle.
and we went down to the marketplace where they sell turtles to eat,
Yeah.
and we bought one of their turtles before it was slaughtered, of course.
Yeah.
And that's what we used in the film. And
You
after
let
the
it
film
go.
was over, we let it go.
Nice man. The turtle was saved. But Ricou was hungry still. Let me see. Anybody? Might as well go ahead and start opening up the floor to questions. Anybody got anything? Go ahead.
Kind of a silly question, but the little gadget that you use as the breathing device, is there anything similar that you've used later that was like not a big tank? I know that was gadget.
What those were
yeah.
two little CO2 bottles
Mhm.
onto a fake mouthpiece. And Frank had to hold his breath. He'd put it in there and pretend he was breathing and held his breath. Because they didn't have anything in those days that size, that could have air in it. So he'd have to hold his breath, and he did a very good job using it.
Anybody else?
How do you give direction underwater? I mean, how do you say, oh, you guys move closer together? I mean, there's
We worked
no
off
little radios
a,
in their ears or anything.
we
right?
worked off a ship called a Sandy Barge, and it was quite large. And we rehearsed everything we were going to do on the barge. And in those days, we didn't have underwater communication to talk. We used hand signals. And the guys that I had worked with, 15 or 20 guys I had worked with in Sea Hunt and other shows, we worked out hand signals. And we used those underwater. But if those didn't work, we'd come back up, go over the scene again on the barge, go back down, and do the scene again.
The Vulcan, after the Vulcan bomber was used and you guys got done shooting, what did you end up doing with it?
We had to. They didn't want it to be used for anything else, so we had to blow it up, and we put primer cord all over it, and just set it off and blew it apart.
What was it made of?
What was left was made of A-frames and fiberglass,
Okay. Right.
and we just blew all the fiberglass out.
Right.
And the A-frame was left there.
Right.
And the funny thing was when we shot Never Say Never Again,
Yeah.
we had to sink a ship to use. And we sank the ship in the same area the Vulcan bomber was in. It was about 200 feet separate from each other. So the ship was here and the old bomber was here.
Yeah. Boy, you're just down there, just be a line of destruction over the years.
No, but it was a great place to shoot.
Yeah,
You could
yeah.
get, calm water.
That is interesting about the fact that you know, you've done this great film, and it's years later, and somebody goes, guess what, they're remaking it, and they want you to come back and work on it again. Did you kind of go, really? Or were you sort of like, oh, this is cool, you know?
No, I jumped at it.
Yeah. Could you tell us some things about that film and working on that one? Anything different?
Well, I'll start off with Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
In Thunderball, he wasn't a very good diver or very good at all.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to get him to use the tanks and breathe and get close-ups. But when we shot Never Say Never Again, he was a very good diver. And he did a lot of his own work. And the only reason he didn't do all of it is he was shooting topside while we were shooting underwater, and he couldn't be two places at once. So a different double, I'm sorry. Big John McLaughlin double. We had to use him instead of Sean.
Mm-hmm. Were there any production things that really stand out with you in making that film? I mean, was there something? I mean, it's kind of funny in some ways because it actually looks like a more intimate film in some ways than Thunderball. You know, was it? I mean, budget was good. They gave you the money you needed, all that, or?
Well, both pictures, as far as I was concerned, I had no budget. They said shoot it and take your time and do it well.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to worry about how much money I was spending because I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any advances in technology in the years between that made it easier to do the second time around?
Yes, we did. We were able to talk underwater in the second one. However, that became a big problem in that everybody could talk. And you're trying to do something and they're trying to, you know, back and forth. And finally I just said, shut up, don't talk unless I talk to you. But then, even then, it didn't always work correctly. So we wound up junking it and just went back to hand signals.
Go ahead, Kyle.
You were talking about when you were directing it, if something didn't go the way you wanted, you'd have to come topside again and
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You were saying how in between takes, if something didn't go right, you'd have to come back up to the boat and go over the scene again and stuff like that. What was the reset time like to come up and then go over the scene and then go back down? Was it?
Well, it was you know, you're on the bottom, you swim up to the barge.
Okay.
It's very quick. It's
Okay.
not,
So it wasn't
and you climb out, and then what takes time is when you come out, usually the guys want to get a new tank, so they'll have enough air. So it takes time to get everybody into a new tank, get them equipped again and down underwater again. That takes a little time.
How many people did you have working for you that handled all that, making sure everybody got new tanks and got changed out, and somebody keeping track of how many
We
minutes
had
people
about,
spent
I
down
think
deep?
about 5 or 6 guys
Mhm.
running the air compressor,
Mhm.
filling the tanks, helping people get their equipment. I think about 5 guys.
Anybody else? Let's talk about some other things then too. Let's talk about post Thunderball in terms of other things that you have done. You know, I heard that you were working as recently with Boardwalk Empire. Is that correct? No, I heard
That was my son,
Oh, that was your son.
and we have the same name.
Oh, how sneaky of you.
That IMDb.
So did you bring him up in the business, or he?
Yeah, he actually, I did a show called Flipper,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and
I grew up on one.
it's a long story. We had to get a dolphin to be Flipper. Well, I'll start off before that. Jack Cowden, myself, wrote a book, Flipper. And I went to New York with my last $200 and an airline ticket and tried to sell it as a book. And I went to 2 or 3 different bookstore places. And I got one company that was interested. And I went home. And I never heard from them. And so I got a bright idea because I had worked with Ivan on Sea Hunt and whatever. I said, Ivan, I've got a book, but I tried to sell it. I called him. He's in L.A. And I said, I tried to sell it as a book, and I can't get him to do it. I said, can I ask you to say that you're going to produce it as a movie? He said, yeah, I'll say that. But he says, send me a copy. So I said, okay, so I sent him a copy. In the meantime, I called the book company and I said, I got a producer in California that wants to make this into a movie. When's the book coming out? And they said, well, we're still working on it. Still never heard from him. But a couple of weeks later, I got a call from Ivan. He says, I didn't read the book. He said, my wife did. And she made me read it. I read it. I like it. Let's make a movie. And he got funding from MGM, and we made the first Flipper feature.
I didn't know.
And now back to the dolphin. We had to get a dolphin to play the part of Flipper. Well, I went to all the aquariums that had dolphins, and none of them had dolphins that were with people. They just jumped up and ate fish and took cigarettes out of somebody's mouth, jumped over hoops and whatever. And I said, well, can I get a dolphin I can work with? They said, no. So all the aquariums, including the Miami Seaquarium, which I'll tell you about later, all said no. But we went down in the Keys, and there was a guy named Milton Santini in Grassy Key, and he is a man that catches dolphins and sells them to aquariums. Well, he had a little pond, and he had a dolphin in it, and he had it in there for one reason only. When he catch wild ones, he put them in there, and they would see this tame one eating, they would eat quicker. So that's why he had her there. And I said, can we go look at her? And he said, yeah. So we go over there, and they had a little dock, and the water was about waist deep, and then it got deeper. And so Ivan was there with me, and I climbed in the water and stood there, and she was swimming around. She swam up and stuck her nose under my arm, and I could pet her, and I said, Ivan, we got Flipper. So anyway, we rented Flipper, so to speak, from Milton, and shot the first Flipper feature. After it was over with, we were going to do the TV series. He wanted $1 million.
Whoa.
And I said, no, thank you. And so then I went back to the Miami Seaquarium, and they were now excited because the Flipper feature has been made. And they said, oh yeah, we'll work with you on a TV series. I said, well, I need dolphins. So they caught 5 dolphins for us, and we spent maybe 3 months training dolphins. And that's where my son comes in. I trained him with my son. And we used 2 out of the 5, and the rest we never used. So Mitzi and excuse me, not Mitzi, Susie and Kathy.
Were they all girl dolphins?
I don't know.
I'm curious. I always assumed Flipper was a boy dolphin. I don't think it was an issue with the show.
Flipper was a boy dolphin,
Oh, okay.
supposedly.
Yeah, just like Lassie
But
and the opposite.
I think all the animals we had were female.
Always doing cross
Tell them
sex.
how you trained it to do the, to ride.
What?
How you trained the dolphin for using Ricky to ride.
Oh,
That's so interesting.
when this is the first Flipper feature. We went to the Keys where Mitzi was, and we put her in a bigger pond, and I was training her, and I'd never trained a dolphin before because none of the aquariums would cooperate. So I was learning as well as the dolphin was learning, and I had Ricky, my son, who was about 8, I think then, and I knew I had to get that boy riding a dolphin, but I didn't know how. So anyway, I was training Susie, and I finally got her to retrieve. I could throw a ball, she'd bring back the ball, Mitzi, I mean, and I'd throw something else, she'd bring it back. Then I got to where I could throw a towel and a ball. She'd get the ball, get the towel, come back. And Ricky was there with me, and I got the idea, why couldn't I get her to retrieve Ricky? So I told Ricky, I said, I'm going to fake throwing the ball. When I do, you jump in the water. So I did that. Mitzi went over there, swam around him, looked at him, whatever, and he was wearing cut-off jeans. And she grabbed one of the loops in his cut-off jeans and started pulling him. Well, he accidentally stuck his hand up and got it over her dorsal fin. She towed him right to me. And I said, oh, the mackerel. So I said,
Like a happy
Ricky,
accident?
I said, Ricky, you go on the other side of the pond, I'm going to throw the ball over your head. When I do, you jump in the water. So he did, and it was about 4 times the width of this room. He jumped in the water, gave her a fin, he rode him right to me for a fish. So I knew I had Flipper for the movie. And I called Ivan and told him, and he said, well, get a picture of it. So we took a couple of still pictures, I have one of them, and he was riding the dolphin.
This makes me curious now, the connector between, you know, and we're going to go a little back in time, the Creature from the Black Lagoon to, and the other creature films to, then you working and making shows and working on movies and things like that. What was it like? I mean, you were at Wakulla Springs at the time as a lifeguard, correct?
No.
No?
No, I was in college.
Okay.
In FSU.
Uh-huh. But you were down there, and what were you doing that Jack Arnold saw you and said, you know?
No, what happened, the manager of the hotel, Nuke Perry, called me on the phone, and he said, I have some people coming from California to look at the springs as a location, and would I mind picking them up and taking them there? And he knew I knew the springs well because I'd worked there. So I said, sure, so I did. I took them to the springs, they looked at the river and the alligators, and the whole thing down there was beautiful. Came back, went in the water, they loved the clarity, and the cameraman, Scotty Welborn, asked me if I would swim in front of the camera to show some perspective of the size of the fish and the water and the grass compared to a human. So I did, and I left. And I picked them up, took them back to the airport. They were happy with the location, and that was it. And I got a call about a week later from the manager, and he said, the people that were here are trying to reach you. And he said, I gave him your phone number. And he said, they'll be calling you. I said, okay. So I got a call from Jack Arnold, who turned out to be the director. He said, hey, we're making a movie about a monster underwater, and we like the way you swim. You want to part? And I said, yeah. And I went to California, and they made the suit, and that's how I began.
So, you know, you make the creature films. Was there other things that you did in between the creature films? Was there any film-related stuff, or were you just, hey, Ricou, come on, we want you to swim again for the next film?
No, I worked at an ice plant.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
people would come in with selling ice, and I would collect the money and count it and give it to the boss.
Well, I mean, what I'm wondering is that, okay, so you've made, when you're done making the creature films, what then gets you back into or gets you actually started in the production part of the things, like with Ivan Tours and all that? I'm trying to connect the dots here.
Ivan called me and asked me if I wanted to work on Sea Hunt.
Uh-huh.
And I was working at that time at Silver Springs
Oh, okay.
as a assistant director of public relations. And they came there as a location, looking at it as a location. And once again, I showed them around, and they liked it. And so they started shooting Sea Hunt underwater at Silver Springs. And they used me in the film as a bad guy. And Courtney Brown, who doubled Lloyd Bridges, and I would fight in just about every show. And I always lost. But years later, we did another show called Aquanauts. And I was the good guy, and he was the bad guy, and he always lost.
Well, that's good. It sounds like there's a balance in the universe. Tell us some stuff about Sea Hunt. I always really enjoyed that show. I mean, it's interesting because it seems like you've got a substantial portfolio of film work, but you never really moved away from Florida, did you? I mean, did you ever like, we're out in LA here for a decade, or?
I worked out there on some films.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Sea Hunt.
Right.
Sea Hunt was always shot underwater at Silver Springs. This was the second year of Sea Hunt. First year was shot in California. I wasn't involved in it.
Oh, okay.
Well, we shot at Silver Springs, and after the second year, I met with Ivan. He said, I know you worked in the Bahamas on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And he said, you know that area well. He says, I'd like to move the production company to the Bahamas. Can we go over there and scout it and see about shooting there. And I said, sure. So I went with he and his wife to the Bahamas, and we went in a boat all around the islands and talked about where I had been and what I'd done there. And we looked at the water in various places. And he said, how about write me a letter about why we should shoot over here? So I wrote him a long letter and told him why I thought we should shoot in the Bahamas. I won't get into it because it's very involved. But anyway, I more or less said, there's always a lee you can go to shoot. In other words, if the weather's bad, you can go to a lee over here or over on the south side. And I said, that's the main reason. So he said, okay, let's go. So we formed a company, Underwater Studios, in the Bahamas, and 15 of us moved over there and shot there for 2 or 3 years. And Sea Hunt was one of the shows, Aquanaut was a show, Round the World Under the Sea, and many other productions. And also shooting for other companies, shows that they did using underwater.
Back to Thunderball for a minute. There was something that I saw on the Blu-ray which kind of caught me off guard. There was a boat show portion for a boat show. There was a part of the fight, underwater fight, and shots that weren't used in the film that were actually shown at a boat show. Do you remember anything about that? There was like a fight. I mean, I was watching the footage last week, and it was like, boy, they're really kind of giving away major portions of the film, but it was a different fight with some different angles and
I didn't know
the
anything
bad
about
guys.
it.
Wow, yeah, it's on the Blu-ray,
Yeah.
but it's interesting, and it's the film's still in really good shape. I'm going to chase after one of my other all-time favorite films, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with that, and can you tell us some stuff about it?
There was a master diver from LA, Freddie Zendar, and I had worked with him in a show called Don't Give Up the Ship, Jerry Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
And I doubled Jerry Lewis. And it was fun, very much fun show to do. But anyway, long story short, Freddie remembered that, so he asked me if I wanted to work on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as one of the divers.
Right.
And did I know any other divers from Florida that could go over there? And I knew 2 or 3. So I said yes, I gave them their names, and we went over and we shot 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I was one of the divers,
And y'all shot that in the Bahamas too?
all in the Bahamas.
That's the one with James Mason, the
underwater.
Disney
Yes.
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
The good one.
So is it hard with that's the one where the Nautilus gets attacked by that
Yeah.
giant
Squid.
Did
Right.
y'all have to do special setups for that? Or was that your group working with the squid, or is that like somebody else came in to do that?
Well, they did both.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, most of it was done topside.
Okay.
Very little was done.
So like when you see Kurt Russell,
Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas, thank you, Ron Kirk. That's all like in a set somewhere on a stage. But anything underwater.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Were you on that one quite a bit, or was it just like a few
Well,
shots?
they shot for about 3 months.
Yeah.
The reason they didn't use underwater cameras as we know them, with a swimmer swimming with a camera. They used cameras on tripods, and they would put mats down on the deck, and they would put the tripod down, and the camera would get just like you shoot topside, just like you have right here. And that's the way they shot it. And they had a housing over the camera, and the next setup, they'd have to move the mats, move the camera, and they didn't have any free swimming cameras except for a Navy diver that was there that had a camera, and he shot some footage. Whether they used any of that footage, I don't know.
So were their cameras submerged?
Yeah,
Oh, so there were underwater cameras then.
they had a housing over the camera.
Like a glass housing or something.
Well, no, it was metal and glass in the front.
Right, glass in the front. Right.
But everything, and then they would put it up on like if they wanted to get a high angle, they would put a framework, A-frames, a platform, A-frames platform, put the camera on top of the platform and shoot from there. Whereas now, today, you just swim up and shoot,
Right.
But that's why it took so long.
Do you remember how deep those shots were taking place?
It was only in 30 feet. The deepest we worked on that show was 30 feet. We had a funny incident. One of the California divers did it. We went home. We lived in a hotel right downtown Nassau, right on the water. And so we were eating that night, and we all ate in the same place, and we're eating. And one of the divers from California got up and he said, "Hey, where's," I forget his name, "where is Stillwell?" He said, "I don't know. Is he up in his room?" He said, "No, did he get on a bus?" I said, "No, he didn't get on a bus." "You mean you left him out there working?" And the guy said, "No." And then all of a sudden, out of the water comes up a guy over the wall at the restaurant with a helmet on and everything. And he takes it off and he says, "You guys left me out there." It's hilarious.
Ouch. You just forgot it?
No, he stayed. There's all stayed.
Oh, good. I was gonna say, I was hoping it was a joke, but I could be impaired.
Mr. Browning, did you ever, and I have a reel of it, and I've never found any information on this, but it was maybe a competitor to Sea Hunt with Buster Crabbe called Davy Jones. Have you ever heard of that show or know anything about it? It came out, it dates to about 1958-59. And no one's ever heard of it, but I've got a reel of it. And I was wondering, it's got some wonderful underwater scuba stuff, so I thought maybe you knew about it.
Was it for a TV show? Right?
I'm thinking it must have been some pilot that never sold, but it's beautiful. But
Yeah, I never heard
there's
of it.
not even any information I could ever find on it.
Oh, me first.
I'd like to ask about a film that seems to have disappeared called Mr. No Legs that you directed. I've seen a collector friend of mine had a poster for it. It was
Yep.
really intriguing. About a fellow with no legs in a
It's
wheelchair.
a film we did in Tampa, Florida. It was shot in 16 millimeter and then later blown up into 35. The budget of the film was $80,000, and I used a lot of the actors that I knew because it was a very cheap film to make, and they're good actors. And we filmed, I don't know, it was probably for about a month, but we ran out of money. And the actors, some of them worked a little bit overtime for nothing. And we had to make the film long enough to show.
Right.
And the only way we could do it is we had a car chase in the film. We just had increased the car chase. And I think the film has one of the longest car chases in the history of filmmaking. It was a fun film to do. And the guy that was Mr. Lowlegs was a super guy. And he really did. He was a karate fighter in a wheelchair.
Wow.
And had shotguns on his wheelchair. He'd shoot people. And anyway, it's a
pretty
very
good.
action-packed film, but very cheaply done.
Excellent. And we'll get to you, Kyle, after that. Go ahead.
Mr. Browning, I know you shot in Big Water and in the Springs. Have you thought, because I know I grew up around the Crystal River area in Crystal Springs, did you ever think about doing a book or a documentary about the film history in that area, or just all the filming that took place there?
I'm not sure what he said.
He was asking with all your experience in the Florida area with Silver Springs, Crystal Springs, Cullum.
Yeah.
You ever thought about putting together some kind of a book or volume that would discuss that filmic history? Is that what you're talking about of that area?
I don't think there's been one written that I know of.
They want you to do it.
Well, my daughter, sitting over here, is writing a book about my movie career.
Yeah, that's good.
And it'll be out next year. But anyway, it's not just about springs. Some of the springs are involved in it, of course.
Did you work on was it the Glass Bottom Boat movie? I think they shot that down in Florida.
Do
Glass Bottom Boat?
Forrest Day, Rod Taylor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Did y'all work on that one?
What about, I know that they filmed part of Airport 77 with the plane underwater.
No, I didn't work on
Didn't
that.
work on that one?
How about
Well, this is the
Jupiter's
panel.
Darling with Esther Williams.
Oh, so you actually, I was making a joke about you. So what was it like working with her?
Great. She's strong as an ox.
You swimmers tend to
Yeah. We had a
do
fight
pretty
scene,
good.
more or less. We were chasing her.
What film
And
was
I had a
that?
beard and all kind of.
What was the name of the
Which
film again?
Yeah.
Jupiter's Darling.
Jupiter's Darling.
And I had to chase her underwater. whatever. But when she grabbed you, she strong as a mule.
What about Raise the Titanic and Lucky Lady? Those are,
Raise the Titanic was we shot model stuff. I don't know if anybody saw the film.
Oh, yeah.
But when we shot it, it was the highest budgeted film that was ever made.
Yeah.
$48 million.
Yep.
Sir Lou Grade in England was the financier.
Right.
And we shot in tanks in Malta, and we built the tank. It's huge, and we sank the ship there. And we had to shoot the models. And I practiced in L.A. with the cameraman Bob Stedman of how to shoot it and how to shoot models, because I'd never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And we practiced until we could do it fairly good. Then we went to Malta and shot the film.
Have you ever had any to yourself injuries from all this underwater work?
Injuries?
Yeah.
Like to you. Yeah.
The only
Besides
injury I
my
had was the
spears.
one I told you about.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
But some of the other divers and films that I've worked on, Courtney, I told you about his heart problem. Well, he had another problem. What was it?
it was when the spear was supposed to, or something shot him and the acid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We had a shot where Mon bends over and shoots his shotgun thing. And he hits a diver and explodes and kills him. So, but we rigged Courtney with a explosion on his chest right here, and took his wetsuit and cut it so that it would, open up easily. And when they shot the spear gun here, the shotgun thing here, it exploded, and Courtney died, so to speak. But what happened was, when it exploded, the gas from the phosphorus explosion went up his suit and down his back.
Ouch.
And it
Ooh,
really-
phosphoric acid burns?
It fried him. Really, he had a big blister size of my hand on his back. So he had that injury. But that's the only other injury we had.
Did you have another question, Kyle?
Oh, I was going to say about the no legs. We found, we were talking about it Friday morning. The full movie's on YouTube. So
Uh-huh.
you can check that out there.
Yeah, you can see the whole movie, I think.
Check it out.
I had another thing happen on Mr. No Legs. Two young men called me and said they wanted to talk to me about redoing or remaking or fixing Mr. No Legs movie. And I said, yeah, I'll talk with you. So I met with them, and they must have interviewed me for an hour or more. And what they were doing, they got the rights to Mr. No Legs from the wife of the producer who was dead. And they wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping them. And I said, yeah. So anyway, we talked for a long time. And they gave me a bunch of original posters from the movie that was released in England, I believe. I'm not sure, or France. And they're going to redo it, they said. So I don't know.
Cool. Sounds good. Go ahead, please.
What was your inspiration for the story of Flipper?
I was working at the Seaquarium doing something. I don't remember what it was. And I came home after working there for that day, and the kids were watching television. They happened to be watching Lassie. And I sat down and I kind of said, why not make a movie about a boy and a dolphin, just like Lassie? And that's where it started. And I got, my brother-in-law is a pretty good writer. I'm not. And I have ideas. And so I got with him, and we sat in a little cottage on a waterfront. And over 2 days, we wrote Flipper, the story of Flipper. And that's how it began.
Thank you.
Cool. Very cool. Good show. I think we are just about it. You got another one?
Did you have a particular job that was your favorite for any particular reason?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a particular job that was your favorite for any particular reason? Either the interesting of the job or where it was shot, or just because they paid you the best? Yeah,
That's a good one. No, I think my favorite movie is Salty. I raised a sea lion in my home for a year or more, or whatever. and trained it there with my daughter and son and a few others. And then we wrote a movie, Salty. And then we shot a movie, Salty. And Clint Howard, who is Ron Howard's brother,
Right.
and Rance Howard was in the film also. And it was a very well done little film, I thought. But it just never did well. It was at the time when G-rated films were going downhill.
It was too bad.
And it just never really made it. So
Would that have been pre or post Gentle Ben? My brother watched him all the
Yeah, I
time. in Gentle
remember
Ben.
Ivan.
it was after Gentleman.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, G-rated movies started to disappear about then.
Well, I think our time is up, and
Thank you.
I want to thank you. A great career, great career.